March 23rd, 1944. On Albert Speer's mahogany desk sat a leather briefcase stamped Geheim nur für den Minister, top secret, for the minister only. It remained unopened. Through the tall windows of the Reich Ministry of Armaments, Speer watched workers clearing rubble from the previous night's bombing raid. He did not yet know that the papers inside that briefcase would shatter every illusion he still held about this war. The disparity was so vast, Speer later wrote in his memoirs, that I initially thought our intelligence had misplaced a decimal point. They had not. In 1944, German factories, despite Speer's miraculous reorganization, produced 39,807 aircraft. Hitler had called him a genius of organization for that achievement. The United States, 96,000 aircraft. America alone, not counting Britain, not counting the Soviet Union, 2.4 times Germany's entire output, and they did it without breaking a sweat. Albert Speer became Minister of Armaments on February 8, 1942, after Fritz Todt died in a mysterious plane crash. At 39, he was the youngest minister in the Reich cabinet, an architect turned industrial wizard. His reforms were revolutionary by German standards. He specialized production, standardized components, slashed aircraft types from 42 down to 5 primary models. He wrested control from competing Nazi factions, streamlined bureaucracy, applied mass production techniques, ironically, learned from American automobile manufacturing in the 1920s. By late 1943, Speer had reason for confidence. Ammunition output had increased fivefold, tank production quadrupled, aircraft tripled. Even as Allied bombs turned German cities to rubble, his decentralized production system kept weapons flowing to the Wehrmacht. He had proven that rational organization could overcome material disadvantage. Then, in early 1944, intelligence reports began arriving that challenged everything he believed. The numbers seemed impossible. German propaganda still insisted America was a nation of jazz musicians and Hollywood actors. Weakened by racial mixing and democratic inefficiency, how could such a country produce weapons that dwarfed the entire output of the German Reich? The awakening began in January 1944. Luftwaffe intelligence intercepted and decoded American production reports sent to the Soviets through the Lend-Lease program. General Adolf Galland, Inspector General of Fighters, brought these findings to Speer personally. According to intelligence, Galland reported, the Americans claimed to have produced 9,113 aircraft in December 1943 alone. 9,000 aircraft in a single month, nearly matching Germany's entire quarterly output. Speer initially dismissed these figures as propaganda designed to demoralize German intelligence, but confirmation came from multiple sources. A Swedish engineer who had toured the Willow Run plant before America entered the war and provided detailed reports with reconnaissance photographs. The factory is 2/3 of a mile long, a quarter-mile wide. The report stated, by April 1944, they are achieving output of one complete 4-engine bomber every 63 minutes. They operate 2 9-hour shifts, 6 days per week. Simple arithmetic. Nearly 650 bombers per month from a single facility. Speer studied the photographs with a magnifying glass. The images showed not just finished aircraft, but the assembly process itself, a revolutionary production line where aircraft move past fixed stations. Rather than workers moving to stationary planes, this was Henry Ford's automobile revolution applied to aviation. After the Abwehr was absorbed into the SS in February 1944, Speer increasingly relied on alternative intelligence sources. Swiss businessmen, maintaining commercial ties with American firms, provided production figures from annual reports. Spanish diplomats in Washington forwarded American newspapers' publications that openly printed production statistics. Portuguese merchants reported on American ships observed in Atlantic ports. The most valuable intelligence came from Japanese naval attachés in Berlin, sharing information gathered through their embassies in Argentina and Chile. American aircraft were flooding South American training bases in staggering numbers, 500 per month to Brazil alone, purely for training. Swedish intelligence proved particularly detailed. The SKF Ball Bearing Corporation maintained factories in America and provided neutral Swedish executives with tours of American plants. These executives, preserving Sweden's precarious neutrality, shared information with both sides. One report described the Pratt and Whitney engine plant in East Hartford, Connecticut. Production of 1,000 engines per week. Test facilities operating continuously. Plant employs 40,000 workers, including 11,000 women. Parking lot contains approximately 15,000 automobiles, personal vehicles of the workers. In March 1944 in his office, Speer spread intelligence reports across the conference table. Deputy for Fighter Production, Carl Otto Sauer, stood beside him, calculator in hand, verifying each figure. Assume these numbers are inflated by 50% for propaganda purposes. Speer said, even then, Sauer replied, they would still be producing 48,000 aircraft annually, still exceeding our total output. But the evidence indicated no inflation whatsoever. American newspapers obtained through neutral embassies openly published production figures. The New York Times covered Boeing's B-29 program without censorship. Time magazine ran features on Willow Run, complete with production statistics. Life published assembly line photographs with traceable serial numbers. This openness was shocking. In Germany, production figures were state secrets. Workers signed secrecy pledges under penalty of death. Factory locations were concealed. But America, they printed production statistics in magazines sold at newsstands. The intelligence file on Willow Run became central to understanding American capability. Built by Ford Motor Company in 1941, the facility represented everything German production was not. The main building covered 3.5 million square feet, larger than the entire Messerschmitt complex at Augsburg. Swedish engineer Per Jakobsson, who toured Willow Run in late 1943, provided a detailed account. The facility employs 42,000 workers, 35% women. Workers remain stationary while aircraft move past them on automated conveyor systems. Training time for new workers averages 3 weeks. Speer compared this to German aircraft production. The Bf-109, Germany's primary fighter, required 4,000 man-hours to manufacture. Workers were skilled craftsmen who assembled entire sections. Average training time was 6 months. At Willow Run, each B-24 required approximately 1,225 man-hours for final assembly. Yet this was a 4-engine bomber weighing 5 times as much as a Bf-109, needing less than one-third the labor. Throughout 1944, Speer attended regular conferences with Hitler at various headquarters. Each time he presented intelligence on American production, Hitler's response remained consistent: denial and accusations of defeatism. At a May conference, Speer presented photographic evidence from Willow Run, along with production figures from neutral sources. Hitler studied the materials briefly, then declared, "Propaganda. The Americans want us to believe these fantasies. No nation can manufacture aircraft like automobiles." But that is precisely what they are doing, Speer objected. They have applied automobile mass production to aircraft construction. These reports are Jewish lies spread by Roosevelt. Hitler insisted, ending the discussion. But other members of the leadership were beginning to accept reality. Field Marshal Erhard Milch, State Secretary for Aviation, privately admitted to Speer, "Those numbers are accurate, aren't they? I believe they are conservative." Speer replied, "Then we have already lost." Back in Berlin, Speer conducted detailed comparative production analysis, according to the later United States Strategic Bombing Survey. The numbers told an undeniable story. German aircraft production in 1944 peaked in July with 4,219 aircraft total. Fighter production peaked in September with 3,375 The year's total reached 39,807 aircraft of all types, 25,285 fighters, 5,468 bombers, 9,054 others. American aircraft production in 1940 rate 8,000 per month. The annual total reached 96,000 aircraft, including approximately 16,000 4-engine heavy bombers, 35,000 fighters, and 45,000 trainers, transports, and other types. But raw numbers told only part of the story. Each American B-24 Liberator carried firepower equivalent to 2 German medium bombers while consuming less fuel. Crew and maintenance per ton of bombs delivered. The quality gap multiplied the quantity disparity. In spring 1944, intelligence revealed yet another dimension of American superiority. Reports from Argentine sources detailed American aluminum production, 420,000 tons annually. German aluminum production, despite controlling Norwegian hydroelectric resources, reached only 245,000 tons. Oil figures were even more alarming. American refineries produce 4.7 million barrels daily. Germany, dependent on synthetic fuel from coal, produced the equivalent of 124,000 barrels daily. The Americans consume more fuel in training flights than the entire Luftwaffe used in combat operations. Japanese military attachés in Berlin shared a revealing observation. Your submarines sink an American tanker carrying 100,000 barrels of oil. They do not reduce consumption. They simply commission another tanker. This is not war as we understand it. This is industrial arithmetic. Beyond production figures, intelligence revealed technological innovations German industry could not match. At Wright Field in Ohio, Americans had tested aircraft engines in pressure chambers, simulating conditions at 50,000 feet, over 15,000 meters. Germany's highest altitude test facility reached only 30,000 feet, about 9,000 meters. American factories employed statistical quality control, random sampling, and statistical analysis, replacing individual product inspection, accelerating production dramatically while maintaining quality. Dr. Ernst Heinkel, the aircraft designer, confided to associates, "We are craftsmen building aircraft. They are industrialists manufacturing aircraft. We cannot compete with mathematics." Intelligence on American shipbuilding provided further evidence of industrial superiority. The United States constructed 2,710 Liberty ships between 1941 and 1945. While the SS Robert E. Peary was famously built in 4 days and 15 hours as well as a publicity stunt. Normal production averaged 42 days from keel laying to launch. By 1943 into 19 more, American shipyards were launching vessels at a rate approaching 3 ships every 2 days during peak periods. German submarines operating in the Atlantic reported convoy after convoy of these ships. The strategic implication was clear. America could replace losses faster than Germany could inflict them. In May 1944, intelligence about the Boeing B-29 Superfortress caused particular concern. Swedish businessmen reported visiting Boeing factories where these super bombers were being manufactured. The specifications seemed impossible. Wingspan of 141 feet, 3 inches, about 43 meters. Maximum loaded weight of 140,000 pounds, over 63,000 kilograms. Bomb load of 20,000 pounds, 9,000 kilograms. Range of 3,700 miles, nearly 6,000 kilometers. Pressurized cabin for high-altitude flight. Remotely controlled gun turrets. Production had begun in 1943 with 3,970 B-29s, ultimately built at 4 facilities. Germany's most advanced bomber project. The Heinkel He-277 remained on paper. The B-29 was already in mass production, with hundreds delivered to training units. When presented with photographic evidence, Göring reportedly declared, "No one can build such aircraft in large quantities." But Galland and other realistic officers knew better. As Galland later wrote in his memoirs, this was not deception. This was industrial reality. Captured American pilots inadvertently provided intelligence confirming production superiority. Their interrogations revealed another devastating gap. Pilot training. American pilots received between 250 and 400 hours of flight training before combat assignment, 60 hours basic training, 70 hours foundational training, 50 to 75 hours advanced training, 75 to 170 hours transition training. German fighter pilots in 1944 entered combat averaging 112 hours, down from 160 hours earlier that year. By 1945, this would drop to just 50 hours. Fuel shortages meant many pilots never flew their assigned aircraft type until their first combat mission. Technical Sergeant William Barnes, a B-17 crew chief captured after his bomber was shot down, provided revealing information during interrogation. "We lose about 60 bombers a month over Germany. Boeing alone produces 140 per month. We have more bombers than trained crews to fly them." In June 1944, they demonstrated American material superiority on an unprecedented scale. More than 5,000 ships, 11,000 aircraft, 150,000 troops in the first wave. But Hitler insisted this was America's maximum effort. Unsustainable. Speer knew better. Intelligence from Argentina reported American shipyards steadily launching new Essex-class carriers, each requiring 27,000 tons of steel and carrying 90 to 100 aircraft. Germany's only aircraft carrier, Graf Zeppelin, remained incomplete after 6 years of construction. Dr. Karl Krauk, chairman of the IG Farben Supervisory Board, reported through Swiss contacts that Americans were producing 800,000 tons of synthetic rubber annually. Compared to Germany's 120,000 tons, they have solved the butadiene production problem that limits our output. They share technology. We guard secrets. They multiply efficiency through cooperation. In July 1944, aerial reconnaissance of the Detroit industrial region revealed concentration exceeding even the Ruhr Valley. Willow Run covered 1,600 acres. Ford River Rouge sprawled across 2,000 acres. Chrysler Tank Arsenal occupied 1,100 acres. General Motors facilities exceeded 5,000 acres combined. Photo analysts identified hundreds of large factory buildings, thousands of vehicles in parking lots, dozens of power plants, and rail yards processing more than 1,000 freight cars daily. August 1944 marked both the peak of German aircraft production and Speer's complete acceptance of inevitable defeat. A comprehensive intelligence summary presented the brutal reality. American production from January through June 1944 totaled 48,000 aircraft, on pace for 96,000 annual, approximately 14,000 tanks, more than 300,000 military trucks, hundreds of naval vessels, 5.75 million tons of merchant shipping. German production for the same period totaled 19,800 aircraft, 9,700 tanks and self-propelled guns, 47,000 military trucks, 193 U-boats. Negligible merchant shipping. American production was accelerating. German production, under strategic bombing pressure, was beginning to decline. The oil campaign had catastrophically reduced fuel output. The transportation plan created bottlenecks, leaving finished weapons stranded at factories. By late 1944, fragmentary intelligence about a massive American project began reaching German intelligence. While the atomic nature remained secret, the industrial scale was evident. Reports described facilities consuming enormous amounts of electricity. Oak Ridge, Tennessee, was using 1/7 of total American electrical production, peak demand reaching 298,800 kilowatts. The Americans were devoting resources equivalent to Germany's entire V-weapons program to a single project whose nature remained unknown. In September 1944, analysis revealed the gap between German and American production was not merely quantitative, it was philosophical. American production emphasized simplification for mass manufacture, interchangeable parts between manufacturers, statistical quality control, and specialized workers. German production emphasized complex designs demonstrating engineering excellence, proprietary components for each manufacturer, individual craftsmanship, and workers as skilled generalists. As Speer later reflected, we built aircraft as works of engineering art. They manufactured them as industrial products. Our Me-262 jet fighter was superior, but we could only build 20 per month. They would have redesigned it for mass production and built 200. By November 1944, even Goering could no longer deny American production's superiority. The Battle of Leyte Gulf demonstrated American naval manufacturing. They deployed more aircraft carriers than Germany had destroyers. At a Luftwaffe conference, Galland presented alarming figures. American fighters outnumbered Luftwaffe fighters 15-1 over German skies. American pilots arrived with 400 flight hours. German pilots had 50. American fighters had reliable engines lasting 400 hours between overhauls. German engines managed 25 hours. We faced not one air force, but several air forces. Galland explained, the 8th Air Force alone has 3,000 heavy bombers. Each American Air Force is larger than our entire Luftwaffe. December 1944 and the Battle of the Bulge provided final proof. Despite achieving complete tactical surprise, German forces were overwhelmed by the American response. Within days, American forces moved 250,000 troops, 50,000 vehicles, and 500,000 tons of supplies to contain the breakthrough. Captured American supply depots revealed abundance beyond German imagination. more supplies in a single depot than entire German divisions possessed. January 1945 brought Speer's most comprehensive assessment. Swiss banking contacts provided American war bond advertisements openly stating production figures. Your war bonds have built 300,317 aircraft from 1940 through 1945, 86,000 tanks, 2.6 million trucks, 6,500 naval vessels, 2,710 Liberty ships. These figures, published in magazines, would have been state secrets in Germany. America advertised them to encourage bond purchases. On January 30th, the anniversary of Hitler's rise to power, Speer attended one final major conference, attempting to convince Hitler to seek surrender terms. Führer, we must face reality. The Americans produce in 1 month what we produce in 1 year. Hitler's response revealed complete detachment from reality. Wars are won by will, not production figures. On March 18, 1945, Speer presented Hitler with a memorandum arguing the German economy would collapse within 4 to 8 weeks. The following day, March 19th, Hitler issued his infamous Nero Decree, ordering destruction of all German infrastructure. Speer's subsequent response on March 29th objected to the destruction. The enemy's superiority in weapons and industrial capacity has reached a level making continued resistance meaningless. The Americans can replace in weeks what we destroy. We cannot rebuild for decades. Hitler accused him of treason and defeatism, but Speer no longer cared. Production figures had convinced him German defeat was certain at the very least since April 1945 as American forces advanced on Berlin. Intelligence on American production continued arriving. A captured Fortune magazine revealed the complete conversion of the automobile industry to war production. The entire American automobile industry, which had produced 4.8 million vehicles in 1941, had converted to military manufacturing, building millions of military vehicles, thousands of aircraft, and tens of thousands of tanks. As the Third Reich collapsed, production figures told an undeniable story. Total verified American war production from 1940 through 1945 included 300,317 military aircraft, 86,000 tanks, 2.6 million military trucks, 639,000 jeeps, 257,000 artillery pieces, 2.6 million machine guns, 6,500 naval vessels, and 2,710 Liberty ships. German war production from 1939 through 1945 included 95,000 aircraft, 63,800 tanks and self-propelled guns, 345,000 military trucks, 61,000 artillery pieces, 1.2 million machine guns, and 1,171 U-boats. The ratios were overwhelming: 3.2 to 1 in aircraft, 1.35 to 1 in tanks. Despite Germany's longer production period, 7.5 to 1 in trucks. These figures did not include Lend-Lease production sent to allies. After the war, the United States Strategic Bombing Survey confirmed that German intelligence had actually underestimated American production. The survey noted, German intelligence estimates of American aircraft production in 1944 projected only 22,440 aircraft. Actual production was 96,318, an underestimate of 330%. While Speer's memoir, Inside the Third Reich, focused primarily on his achievements and relationship with Hitler. In post-war interrogations and interviews, he acknowledged the overwhelming nature of American industrial capability. In a 1970s interview, he reflected, "By early 1944, I knew with certainty that Germany would lose the war. America's production of 96,000 aircraft in 1944 was not a surge. It was sustainable indefinitely." Other German leaders confirmed this awareness. Field Marshal Erhard Milch testified, "When I learned America was producing 9,000 aircraft in a single month, I knew the war was lost." Admiral Karl Dönitz testified, "When intelligence reported Americans were building escort carriers faster than we could build submarines, I knew the Battle of the Atlantic was lost." General Adolf Galland wrote, "Every American pilot we shot down was replaced by 2 better-trained pilots. We faced not an enemy, but an avalanche." American technological superiority multiplied quantitative dominance. The proximity fuse increased anti-aircraft effectiveness by 700%. America produced 22 million of them. Germany never developed this technology. American radar development proceeded along multiple directions simultaneously, mass-producing thousands of sets. While German radar remained handcrafted in hundreds, superchargers gave American fighters decisive altitude advantage. General Electric produced 300,000 during the war. German efforts to copy captured units failed. They lacked the metallurgy for mass production. Economic disparity made German victory impossible. In 1904, American gross domestic product was $210 billion. Compared to Germany's $45 billion, America devoted 45% to war production. Germany devoted 65%. Yet American war production exceeded Germany's total GDP. As historians later noted, America could lose Germany's entire annual output in a single battle and continue fighting. They could accept waste that would have paralyzed the German economy. America trained 435,000 pilots during the war. Compared to Germany's 57,000, by 1945, American pilots were engaging German pilots who had never fired weapons in training. Luftwaffe General Johannes Steinhoff testified, "We were sending children to fight professionals. It was not combat, but execution." Awareness of American production superiority created psychological crisis within German leadership. Progressing through predictable stages: denial, rationalization, despair, delusion, finally, acceptance. This progression affected military strategy, leading to increasingly desperate gambles that accelerated defeat. The greatest paradox was that American production achieved what German ideology declared impossible. Racial integration and gender equality in industry proved more efficient than Aryan supremacy theory. American factories employing diverse workforces voluntarily achieved more than German forced labor. In his final years, Speer reflected on the lesson. "We confused military talent with industrial power. We believed racial ideology could overcome arithmetic reality. We thought will could defeat production. Every assumption was wrong." When I learned they had produced 96,000 aircraft in 1944, I knew not only that we would lose, but that we had already lost. The war continued another year, but the outcome had been decided. The Second World War was not won on the beaches of Normandy or in the rubble of Berlin. It was won in the factories of Detroit, the shipyards of California, the aircraft plants of Seattle. It was won by workers who never saw combat, but whose industrial power made victory inevitable. Germany challenged the world's greatest industrial power with ideology and courage. We learned that in modern warfare. Production is strategy, logistics is tactics, and industrial capacity is victory. The Americans understood this from the beginning. We learned too late. Speer's recognition of American production's superiority marked the moment when rational German leadership understood the war's outcome was predetermined. 96,000 aircraft manufactured in 1944 were not merely machines, they were manifestation of an industrial system achieving unprecedented efficiency. Each B-24 rolling off the Willow Run assembly line every 63 minutes represented systematic superiority of democratic industrial organization over authoritarian control. The production war proved that in modern industrial warfare, the factory floor is as decisive as the battlefield. When Albert Speer saw America produce 96,000 aircraft in 1944, he saw the future, a future where German defeat was certain. The conversion of American industry from consumer goods to weapons of war represented the greatest concentration of industrial power in human history. Against this reality, the Third Reich never stood a chance. Stories like this deserve to be remembered not to glorify war, but to understand the forces that truly shape history. If you want to explore more forgotten perspectives on the conflict that changed our world, consider subscribing as we continue this journey together.